Okay, now we will discuss about TRIMS, that is trade-related investment measures. In fact, trade-related investment measures is one of the four principal legal agreements of WTO treaty. These are rules that restrict preference of domestic firms and thereby enable international firms to operate more easily within the foreign markets. In other words, it is national treatment. Now, what is national treatment? Imported and domestically produced goods should be treated equally. Same principle is applied to investment. Okay, TRIMS, the Agreement on Trade-Related Investment Measures, recognize that certain investment measures can restrict and distort trade. It states that WTO members should not apply any measures that discriminates against foreign products or that leads to quantitative restrictions because both are violation of basic WTO principles. Here, what you have to understand is TRIMS is trying to protect a foreign player making investments. And it is trying to protect both domestic as well as foreign industry because there should be competition in the market and both the players should be in an equitable position. So that's a basic idea behind TRIMS or trade related investment measures. I hope you've got the basic principles underlying that. It is protecting the investments in a foreign land. It does not mean that they are only looking into foreign investments, but WTO lays down a framework within which both the players, the domestic industry and the foreign players, have to compete with each other in a market. These rules are related to the member countries. So they all have agreed into that to promote trade happening between the nations. Okay. Now we can go with Agreement on Agriculture or AOA. Okay, so AOA, Agreement on Agriculture, is an international treaty, which again was negotiated during the Uruguay round in January 1995. And this agreement contains provisions in three broad areas of agriculture and trade policy. Now, what are these three broad areas? Let's look at it. The three broad areas are 1. Market access, 2. Domestic support, and 3. Export subsidies, or otherwise called as export competition. Market access. The market access clause instructs the level of tariff or import duty that members can impose on imports. Obviously, you might be able to understand. The AOA's attempt here is to limit the tariff as low as possible. Now, learners, do you remember what is a tariff? Yes, I hope I got the answer. A tariff is a tax or duty to be paid on a particular class of import or export. See, we have learned the objective of WTO to facilitate the trade. So, in order to facilitate the trade, market should be accessible with less barriers. This is a measure in that angle to minimize the barriers for the market entry. Okay, so first one is market access. Second one contains policies and regulations regarding the kind of domestic support to be provided to the firms. Now, who provides the domestic support? Basically, the country, the host country, which is inviting investments, automatically will have some measures to protect their own industry also. Right. We were, there were a lot of crises in India when the multi-brand retailing, single brand retailing, all were open for FDI investments and all, because people were having fear that it will be a threat for the small kirana shops within the country. But nothing has happened because there were proper rules and regulations which were guiding both the players in the market. So likewise, domestic support contains the regulation regarding the provisions of domestic support or subsidy by member countries to their farmers. See, for example, maybe some certain countries would require little more additional support for the domestic players because they may not be advanced with technology. Maybe there is shortage of infrastructure facilities, so they need to compensate with all these in order to compete in the market with the foreign players. So to give them a equitable position, to bring them towards to meet the competition effectively, maybe little support, little more higher support is provided by the government for those type of domestic industries. To what extent or what category of support can be given? All that is mentioned in case of the domestic support regulations. Here, AOA actually classifies domestic support into trade distorting and non-distorting strategies or categories. Subsidies. Basically, the subsidies can be classified into trade distorting and non-distorting. Trade distorting strategies should be reduced. Subsidies which are causing trade distortion should be reduced. That's what the regulation is all about. And if it is not distorting, of course, you can go ahead with it. For example, see certain countries, agriculture subsidies are given. The main intention here is providing food security and livelihood for the people. It's actually a security to the poor consumers, right? So in that case, there is no equal ground. These people are provided with higher subsidies which can distort the trade, but the basic intention of the government is positive. They want to support the poor consumers. They want to support the people in the lower strata, right? So but however, in a common platform, that is categorized as trade distorting strategies or subsidies. So here WTO lays down that such strategies, as far as possible, should be minimized, should be reduced. Okay. Now in this angle, WTO sets limit beyond which members can't give subsidies, or they are not permitted to give subsidies. And AOA has also classified domestic subsidies into different types under various boxes. Different boxes by assigning certain colors, like say for example, trade non-distorting subsidies are given green box, less distorting or very minimal distorting are given as blue box. Then there is a red box which should be stopped immediately, or that is prohibited. In agriculture sector you don't have that because that's prohibited, has no red boxes. And there are trade distorting strategies which is otherwise called as amber box, and there is another name for that, aggregate measurement support or AMS. And this, as I said, AMS represents the trade distorting domestic support, and that is why it is called as amber box. And as per the WTO principle, such strategies, such subsidies should be reduced in order to facilitate better trading environment within the member countries. I'm coming again to domestic support. Domestic support principle lays down boundaries of to what extent support can be given to the domestic industries? What kind of subsidies you can follow, you can allow for the domestic industries? Basically, WTO has also categorized these subsidies into two. One is trade non-distorting and trade distorting. And the purpose here is trade distorting subsidies should be eliminated as far as possible, should be eliminated to the minimum in order to provide a better trading environment to the member countries, right? Now we are going to discuss about the third one, which is export subsidies, or otherwise called as export competition. I have put the link here, the key point here, that is prohibits most subsidies directly linked to the volume of exports. And there is an exception given, LDCs. Least developed economies or countries have little preference, because for them, as I said earlier, no, maybe provision of food, maybe food security can be provided only by linking such subsidies. So they have little exemption in that. Otherwise, AOA, WTO through AOA prohibits most subsidies that are directly linked to the volume of exports. So the core, it is the core of the region. I mean, it is the core of the program on export subsidies are commitments to reduce subsidized export quantities and amount of subsidizing exports. Okay, so prohibited subsidies in this category are subsidies that require the recipients to meet certain export targets. Say, for example, if you have to achieve export subsidy, you have to export the whole of your product. Some nations, no, so in order to promote export, they will say you have to achieve 100% export of your products if you have to achieve the subsidy. So that means those products will not be available in the domestic market. Such type of subsidies should be avoided. That's what which has been prohibited, or that's a regulation which is put forward through export subsidies. Second one is subsidies that require recipients to use the domestic goods instead of imported goods. It is indirectly protecting the market. You're given a subsidy to the domestic goods purposefully by linking that to your exports, which may be difficult for the firms to operate. So WTO is against such regulations. So they are prohibited because they are specifically designed to distort the international trade and are therefore likely to hurt the other countries' trade. Because when you are saying that you use only products from a particular country, automatically you are prohibiting the market for the other players to come in. So such type of export subsidies should not be used in the member countries. That's what export subsidy clause is all about. So here again it is promoting a barrierless trade. That's it. Okay, so AOA, it's an international treaty of WTO which was negotiated primarily for the purpose of agriculture or agriculture related industry. And it has basically three clause or three regulations. First one, which I have already mentioned, the first one is market access, second one is domestic support, and the third one is export subsidies or competition. Market access aims at providing better accessibility to the market, right? Domestic support, the essence of it is minimizing the trade distorting domestic support to the local industries, right? And export subsidies, again, it prohibits those subsidies that will distort the market conditions for the foreign players, right? So it is something, all export subsidies which are directly linked to the volume of exports are advised to be avoided in a member country through the AOA agreement. Are you there with me? It is simple, but you have to put little time on it to know the difference between that. You can go through your reading materials. You can go through the there are a lot of materials available in WTO site itself. They have provided examples, conditions, laws, regulations. So substantiate our discussion with additional reading from all these sources. Okay. Okay, learners. Now can we discuss about the dispute settlement mechanism by WTO? Do you remember the fifth agreement on dispute settlement? When we were talking about the six main parts of agreements, the fifth one which we discussed were agreement on dispute settlement. So that is the basic framework for guiding the dispute settlement mechanism. Now we are going to look into detailed dispute settlement mechanism. Basically, the apex body in WTO is the body consisting of all the representation from the member countries. That is, every member country will have a representation in the apex body. The second body, which is formed from time to time, is a body of experts in order to consider specific cases. That is called as the panels. So, panel consists of experts to consider a specific case. So, that's the second one. Now, the process involves the first stage, which is consultation stage, second stage, which is panel being appointed, and the third stage, if the panel opinion or recommendations are rejected, third stage goes to appeal stage. Either both the parties can appeal or one from the group can appeal, because if the group is not happy with that recommendation of the panel. So that's why accept or reject the recommendation of the panel. If rejection, it goes to appeal. That's a broad mechanism. Now we will look at, see, I have said, normally we will come into detail, okay, to each of these stages, but preliminary, I'll just say the consultation stage normally takes 60 days. Normally, it takes 60 days. And if that is not satisfactory, the next stage is the appointment of panel. So panel setup and panelists have to be appointed within 45 days. And of course, the panel will submit the report to the concerned parties within 60 days from the date of appointment. I mean, not 60 days, 6 months. I'm sorry, 6 months. I corrected. 6 months from the date of appointment. And if there is some kind of appeal, then it goes to the next stage, which is the dispute is presented in the appellate tribunal, and we will discuss that. If not, the final report has to be ready within 60 days. The dispute settlement body adopts a report if there is no appeal within 60 days. So altogether, you have 60 days consultation, 45 days for appointment of the panel, 6 months for the panel to submit the report, and it will take at least 60 days to come up with the final report, and maybe 3 weeks in between is given for the committee to review the report before they accept it or reject it. So that altogether it will take 1 year, approximately 1 year, for the regular dispute mechanism within the WTO without appeal. If there is appeal, it will take further, because appeal stage 60 to 90 days will take for the appellate tribunal to give the report whether to accept the recommendation of the panel or reject it. It will take at least 60 to 90 days. And then again, another 30 to 40 days for the committee to prepare the final report. So again, total will be 1 year and 3 months. That's if if it is with an appeal. If not, it will take approximately 1 year to settle the dispute in case of a dispute between two nations or two members of the WTO. I hope you got the framework. You have an apex body. It has a representation of every member country. Then a panel can be formed to consider a particular case, looking into the requirements, specific requirements. And at times, in specific cases, it may lead to further appeal of the recommendation of the panel, which will take further days. So the total will be 1 year, 3 months. If it is with appeal, and without, it will take approximately 1 year. And now can we discuss stage 1? Basically, the settling of this dispute is the responsibility of dispute settlement body of the WTO. Okay, there will be a dispute settlement body, and the members of that body is appointed for a period of, normally for a period of 4 years. Okay, and the dispute settlement body has the sole authority to establish panels of experts to consider a specific case. We said no panel can be appointed. They have the sole responsibility to appoint a panel, and the results to accept or reject the panel's findings also is vested with this dispute settlement committee or body. So in short, dispute settlement body of WTO monitors the implementation of the rulings and recommendations, and also they have the power to authorize retaliation when a country does not comply with the ruling. Okay, this is the general procedure. Now let's go deep into that. The first stage, consultation. Now what is the stage? As I said, it will take approximately 60 days. What is this stage? See, when you have a problem, right, first thing to do is discuss it among yourself. Discuss it among the parties involved in that. Right. That's the first right step towards solving a problem. That is the same applicable principle in case of consultation. Before taking any other actions, the countries in dispute have to talk to each other to see if they can settle the differences by themselves. Right? That happens as a preliminary stage of consultation. If they fail to do so, if they are not agreeing to the conditions of each other, then the second phase of consultation is they can also ask the WTO Director General to mediate or try to help them. So, consultation phase has 2 phases. One is preliminary, talking between the concerned parties. If that is not working properly, the second stage is they seek the help of WTO Director General to mediate for them to solve the issue. These are the 2 phases of the consultation stage. Simple, right? Are you there with me? Okay, so that's the end of first stage. Approximately, it will take 60 days. Now, if that is not going to work, if the countries are not agreeing to all the conditions laid down to settle, then it is taken to the second stage where a special panel is to be appointed. Now, this appointment of panel can take up to 45 days. And then, as I said, another 6 months for the panel to conclude and come up with a report. So, if consultations fail, the complaining country can ask for the panel to be appointed and the responsibility is vested with, I've already mentioned. Can you say? Yeah, you are right. The dispute settlement body. They will appoint a panel. Okay. So, officially, the panel is helping the dispute settlement body in making rulings or recommendations. And normally, the report is not rejected because that has been prepared in consensus with the dispute settlement body. The panel's findings have to be based on the agreement cited. Okay, so the second stage is appointment of a panel, and the panel normally prepares the report within 6 months from the date of appointment. Okay. Now, once that is in the normal case, but if it is the case of an urgency, say for example, if it is a case which is related with perishable goods, you cannot wait for 6 months. So the deadline in such cases can be shortened to 3 months. It's possible. You can shorten the deadlines to 3 months. Normally 6 months, but in urgent situation, the deadlines are shortened to 3 months. Hope you are there with me. Right? So once it is shortened to 3 months, or if it is 6 months, within that period, the first draft of the report is prepared and given to two parties. Both the parties. The first report, draft report, it's not the final. It does not have the conclusion. It does not have the recommendation. The first draft of the findings of the case is given, handed over to both the parties. And they can take up to 2 weeks to comment on it. Okay, based on their incorporating their feedback, the final draft is prepared and submitted within 3 weeks from that time. The 2-week period, no way the parties can extend it. They have to give the comment and feedback within 2 weeks once the draft is submitted. First draft is submitted to them. Right. Then soon after completion of 2 weeks, the committee, the panel goes for preparation of the final draft. It will take up to 3 weeks. Within 3 weeks from that time, they will give the final report to both the parties and also to the WTO members, the dispute settlement body. If the report is accepted without any appeal, the report becomes a ruling. And if it is okay to the dispute settlement committee, okay, then the report becomes a ruling. And if it is rejected, both the parties can go for an appeal, or even one party can appeal that they are not happy with the report. They can go for an appeal. If not appealed, that becomes a final report. So that's the end with this. There is no stage, third stage. But in case if both the parties are going for an appeal, or even if one party is going for an appeal, we move into the third stage. It can normally take up to 60 to 90 days depending upon the complexity of each case. And you have to remember one thing. Appeals have to be based on points of law such as legal interpretation. In case of appeal, you cannot re-examine the existing evidence or examine new issues other than what has been given as a report by the panel. You can only look into the legal interpretation or the legal framework. Nothing more can be done for collecting more evidence or something like that. That's not possible in the normal case. Okay. Each appeal is heard by 3 members of a permanent 7-member appellate body. 3 members would be appointed from the appellate body, permanent. Normally there would be, with the dispute settlement, as part of the dispute settlement body, there is a 7-member appellate body. From that, 3 members normally re-examine a case if there is a appeal. And these people would be representing the WTO membership. And normally the appellate body is also appointed for 4-year terms. Right? And they have to have some kind of legal background. They have to be very much aware about the international trade, and they are not affiliated to any of the member countries' government. All these conditions have to be mandatorily observed by the appellate body appointed. And the appeal can uphold, modify, or reverse the panel's legal findings and conclusions. That is, if the appellate body finds that there needs some revisions, they can do it. And this stage does not last more than 60 days. And in certain cases, it can go up to 90 days. So here finally, the dispute settlement committee has to accept or reject the appeal report within 30 days. And if it is rejecting the appellate body's report, the appeal report, the rejection is possible only by the consensus of both the parties. The dispute settlement body cannot just outrightly disperse the appeal report. It is not possible. It is only with the consensus of both the parties. So this is the actual dispute settlement mechanism, which is with the WTO, World Trade Organization. Simple. Just try to understand. The first stage is consultation stage. Within the body, within the members, the issue is tried to is being taken out, and it is being tried to solve it. The second stage is a panel. The matter is taken to the consideration of a special panel appointed for this particular case. They will consider it. They will prepare a report, and the report can be accepted by both the parties. Report in the sense recommendation. The recommendation can be accepted or rejected. If it is rejected, it will go to the third and final stage, where the appellate body is set up by the dispute settlement body, and the recommendation of the appellate body can be accepted or rejected by the dispute settlement committee. If it is rejected, it has to be done with the consensus of dispute settlement committee as well as the appellate body, because appellate body is also part of WTO. They are also part of permanent members of WTO. So the process is simple, right? Just looking into this chart, you can straight away write what is the dispute settlement mechanism by WTO. Okay, right. We are going to the next. I hope the learners are with me. It's very simple. Just try to understand by looking into the general scenario. Okay, moving further. This is almost the last. We have reached to the last part of the the third module. Now we are going to look at some of the terms which are normally used when we are discussing about international institutions. Okay, the most common in that is special drawing right, or SDR. I know that you have heard about SDR. SDR, or special drawing rights, refer to an international type of monetary reserve currency created by the International Monetary Fund in 1969 that operates as a supplement to the existing money reserves of member countries. Now, in a nutshell, what is it? It is a kind of financial assistance to the member countries. Okay. Initially, when it was created, SDR was initially defined as equivalent to 0.888671 grams of fine gold, and this was equivalent to $1 at that time when it was created. That was, the time is 1969. But later, after the collapse of Bretton Woods system, the SDR was redefined as a basket of currencies. Now, what do you mean by that? A basket of currencies? It is nothing but the value of SDR is based on the value of a basket of 5 currencies. Now, which are these 5 currencies? They are, definitely you can guess. The major weightage is given to US dollar, second is euro, Chinese yuan, Japanese yen, British pound sterling. British pound sterling, US dollar, euro, Chinese yuan, Japanese yen. So these are the basket of 5 currencies. So that is SDR, in short, is a kind of short-term financial assistance which are given to the member countries by IMF for meeting their temporary requirement, maybe the financial crisis. So that is why it is called a special drawing right. Why? It is enjoyed by the member countries. It is an international reserve asset to supplement its member countries' official reserves. I hope you know it. SDR, special drawing rights. Now the next is just a recap. You know it, but I'm just going with it because you had been hearing about Uruguay round from the beginning when we were discussing about international finance. Right. The Uruguay round was the 8th round of multilateral trade negotiation conducted within the framework of GATT, spanning from 1986 to 1993. The round led to the creation of World Trade Organization, with GATT remaining as an integral part of WTO agreements. So, Uruguay round is famous because it led to the establishment of WTO. Okay, so it was the 8th round of multilateral trade negotiations. I said before the settlement of, or before the institutionalization of WTO, we already had general agreement on tariff and trade, which were looking into the different aspects of international trade. So it is a multilateral trade negotiation which was initiated under GATT prior to the establishment of WTO. But Uruguay round is important. It is significant because it's the 8th round which led to the formation of WTO, World Trade Organization. I hope you got the importance of Uruguay round. Now, the next thing is we always hear about dumping and anti-dumping. Now, you know what all things you will put in your dump box, waste bin, what you really do not need, what is not important to you, what's not needed by you. That means you're getting rid of something that is not wanted. That's absolutely dumping is all about. So when you're trying to, when this is being practiced by nation in an international market, that's the context where we are discussing about dumping here. It is you are trying to get rid of some product or some goods which you are not in need of, which you do not want in your country. That is the context in which dumping is used in international trade. But there is another version to that. It can also be exporting a product at a price that is lower in the foreign importing market than the price in the exporter's domestic market. For example, if you're selling a product for $1 in your market, and if you're trying to sell that at $0.50 in another market, take the example of India. There is no logic in that. How can you do that? Right? So the underlying principle is you want to get rid of that product from your market. So you keep the price high in your market because you don't want that product in your country, in your nation. And you keep a lower price for that product in some other nation so that people will buy in that country. You're trying to distort the market actually. That is also brought under the category of dumping. Now in that case, what is anti-dumping all about? I did not put anything because I wanted you to guess. What is anti-dumping? Can you guess? I think you guessed it right. It is a protective measure against dumping. It is a protection measure that a domestic government imposes on foreign imports that it believes are priced below fair market value. Right. See, no, the most common example is anti-dumping duty. You impose a high duty on such product which you think that the products are just dumped into your market. There will be high heavy duty on such products. That is called as anti-dumping duty. So that the price of that product will be higher in your market. So the object of anti-dumping is to offset the injurious effect of international price discrimination, while customs duty have implication for the government and for the government, the implication for the government in the revenue, in their revenue, and also for the development of the economy. You are charging high duty on it, which ultimately falls as the revenue of that particular country, and that can also lead to economic development of overall development of the economy. At the same time, you're restricting the dumping practice of any other country in your trade arena. So that is dumping and anti-dumping. So anti-dumping is a measure against or a protective measure against the dumping practices which are prevalent in the international market. Are you there with me? Okay. Now the next one is international liquidity. Now, do you know why we have been discussing about all these economic institutions? The basic idea is all these institutions are aiming at bringing liquidity in the international market. They all have an objective of providing liquidity in the international market. Now, what is international liquidity? It's actually, I put it very rightly here, all the financial resources and facilities that are available to the monetary authorities of individual countries for financing the deficits in the international balance of payments. For financing the deficits in the international balance of payments when all other sources of supply of foreign funds prove insufficient. So international liquidity is provided by all these economic institutions by providing them financial assistance. See, I just now discussed about special drawing rights. This is an instrument instituted by IMF for providing liquidity in the international market. Same way World Bank also does. New Development Bank also does. Asian Development Bank also does. So international liquidity is financing at the time of need for the member countries when there is a deficit in the balance of payment. Now, do you think that international liquidity is very much needed for facilitating the trade in the international market? Yes, the answer is a big yes. International liquidity is an essential ingredient in the international trading scenario or in the international trade and services market. Right. So we have come to the end of our third module. I hope you are there with me, but you have to read lot to substantiate this understanding of the terminologies which we have been trying to discuss. All these terminologies have vast significance in the international market, which can be understood well if you read through different situations and cases. There are plenty of study materials available in the I have given you some of it. At the same time, it is also available on net, especially in the site of IMF, WTO. You have to visit the official site of all these international organizations where they have provided all the terminologies with relevant examples. So just proceed with that. Now, towards the end, the ball is pushed to your court. Just look at it. This is your assignment. Okay. This is your assignment for this module. And the assignment is, there are two assignments which is clubbed into one. Okay. One is, it's part of your syllabus. One is the ministerial conferences of WTO and their outcome from 1996 to 2017. You have to take it separately from 1996. In fact, we had one in 2020, which is postponed because of the present crisis. So you can look up to 2017, 1996 to 2017, and you have to write a small report of the outcome of each ministerial conference from that time. Okay, that's your first part. Second part is you have to critically evaluate what is the impact of WTO regulations on India's foreign trade. India is a member, you know it, right? So what is the impact? I want you to critically evaluate it and write a report on it. So both this can come up to maximum of 2000 words. Minimum is 1500. And I very much insist that the plagiarism rate should be less than 5%, and the weightage to this assignment is 10%. Okay. Date of submission, the final date of submission is 3rd of May. And you can submit the assignment in our Edmodo platform. I have set the assignment due date as well as the link. You can submit it. Hope you are there with me, learners. We will be back with the fourth module